3 summers ago, I ran a side-by-side in my test bed. Same cucumber variety, same soil, same drip line. The only difference was one cut I made on each vine, a cut almost nobody teaches anymore. The plant I left alone gave me 9 cucumbers and a mountain of leaves. The plant I cut produced 34, same season, same water. The technique used to be standard in commercial cucumber houses, then it quietly dropped out of the home garden advice after the war. I dug it back up, tested it 2 seasons, and confirmed it works. Stay with me to the end because there's also a single pantry item I add to my watering can the week the first fruit sets that keeps a vine producing into October. So where did this cut go? Because somebody decided you didn't need it anymore. After the war, the advice that reached home gardeners came down through the USDA extension offices, and it came hand in hand with a fertilizer industry that suddenly had a lot of product to move. Here is the anchor. Before the war, the commercial cucumber forcing houses, the big glass operations growing undercover, trained their vines to a single stem. 1 litre climbing a string. And that method showed up in the early 1940s USDA greenhouse vegetable bulletins written down in black and white. It was standard practice. Then 1945 happened. The wartime munitions plants that had been cranking out ammonium nitrate for explosives got converted to making agricultural fertilizer. Overnight, there was an enormous supply of cheap synthetic nitrogen looking for a market, and the advice that went out to the home gardener shifted. It stopped being about training and pruning the plant, and it started being about feeding it. Feed more, water more, pour it on, and stand back. Think about why. Pruning is labor. It sells nothing. You can't bag it, ship it, or put a price tag on it. A bag of fertilizer you can. So the technique that didn't move product quietly fell out of the home garden literature, while the advice that did move product took its place. And here is what that cost you. I have measured it in my own test bed. An unpruned cucumber vine gives you 3 to 4 times fewer cucumbers buried under a tangle of dense, disease-prone leaves. That is not a small difference. That is most of your crop. Gone. Traded for foliage. I found this technique the same way I find most of the good ones, digging through old pamphlets, the kind nobody reads anymore. I tested it in my test bed for 2 seasons. It works. And the fact that it disappeared from the advice you were handed tells you exactly who that advice was written for. So let me show you the cut. This is the whole technique, and it is simpler than the advice that replaced it. You train each cucumber vine to a single main stem. 1 litre climbing straight up your trellis. That is it. Every lateral side shoot that tries to branch off the main stem, you pinch it off as soon as you see it, when it is still a soft little nub, no bigger than your fingernail. You do not let it run. You do not let the plant build a second highway. 1 stem going up. Then there is the second half of the cut, and this is the part almost nobody does. On the bottom 5 to 7 leaf nodes, that first roughly 12 to 18 inches of stem coming up off the ground, you strip everything. Every flower, every side shoot, every little fruit that tries to set down low, you take it all off and you leave that lower stretch of stem bare. The plant climbs naked for the first 1.5 feet, and only above that do you let it start carrying fruit. That is the cut. 1 litre, laterals removed as they emerge, and the bottom nodes stripped clean. In the old commercial cucumber houses, they called it single stem training or cordon training. I run it on Market More 76 in my test bed, which is a reliable old slicing variety and the same one I had on both vines in that side-by-side, same plant. The only thing that changed was the knife. And that one cut is exactly the kind of thing that got written out of the home garden advice because you cannot sell it. There is no bag for it. There is no jug. It is just you, your fingers, and a vine. All right, let us keep going. Because the next question is always the same. Why does cutting a plant make it give you more, not less? It sounds backwards. It sounds like you are punishing the plant. So here is the science. A cucumber vine is indeterminate. What I mean by that is it does not have a built-in stopping point. It is not programmed to reach a certain size and quit. It keeps growing, keeps branching, keeps throwing out new leaves and new laterals all season long as you let it. Left alone, that is exactly what it does. It builds a giant green machine. Leaves on leaves on leaves. Now, every leaf on that plant is running photosynthesis. turning sunlight into sugar. That sugar is the plant's whole budget. And where that sugar goes is the entire ball game. The technical term is photosynthate partitioning. What that means in plain language is the plant is constantly making a decision about where to spend the sugar it just earned. It can spend it on more vine and more leaves, or it can spend it on fruit. It cannot spend the same sugar twice. An unpruned, indeterminate cucumber pours that sugar into vegetative growth by default. More laterals, more canopy. It is building the factory instead of running the product line. So you end up with a magnificent leafy plant and a handful of cucumbers because the plant kept reinvesting in itself instead of paying out. When you cut it down to a single leader and strip the bottom nodes, you take away every place the plant wanted to spend that sugar except one, up the main stem into fruit. You're not punishing the plant, you're removing its options. The energy has nowhere else to go, so it goes into cucumbers. That is the mechanism. That is why a cut produces more, and there is a bonus you get for free. A single leader vine is an open vine. Air moves through it. Light reaches every leaf instead of the bottom third sitting in a damp, shaded tangle. Down here in the foothills with our hot, humid summers, that matters enormously because powdery mildew and downy mildew live and breed in still, shaded, wet leaf canopies. Open the plant up and you cut that disease pressure way down. The unpruned vine is not just giving you fewer cucumbers, it is building the exact dark, crowded, humid environment that mildew wants. The pruned vine dries out after every rain. Less disease, more fruit from the same cut. And again, none of that is something you can put in a bottle, which is exactly why it slipped out of the advice you were handed. Now let me give you the actual numbers because in my garden the plant does not lie and the records do not lie. 3 summers ago, I ran the side-by-side I mentioned. 2 Market Moore 76 vines, same raised bed, same soil, same drip line, same zone, same schedule on the timer. The only variable was the cut. I left one vine completely alone, the way the standard advice tells you to. I trained the other to a single leader and stripped the bottom nodes. The unpruned vine gave me 9 cucumbers across the season. 9 under a mountain of leaves so thick I had to dig around to find what little fruit there was. The pruned vine gave me 34, same season, same water, 34 against 9. And I did not trust it the first time. One season is an anecdote, not a result. So I ran it again the next summer, same setup, and the gap held, better than 3-1 in favour of the cut, both years. That is when I wrote it down as confirmed, and it was not just the count. I pulled out my refractometer. That is the little handheld tool I use to read Brix, which is the sugar content of the fruit. Higher Brix means the plant moved more energy into the cucumber, and it means a sweeter, less watery, better eating cucumber. The unpruned fruit came in around 3. The pruned fruit read around 4.5. So the cut did not just give me more cucumbers, it gave me better ones. More sugar in each fruit, because the plant was not splitting its budget 30 ways. My neighbour Carol saw my test bed that summer and changed how she was handling her own vines. Stopped letting them sprawl, started training them up. Her fruit set came in noticeably better the next season. One cut and it travelled right over the property line. That is the kind of result that used to be standard knowledge and somehow became something you have to go digging in old pamphlets to find. Now here's the part that surprised me. And this is the part even people who know about single-stem pruning tend to get wrong. The cut is not a one-time event. It is a habit. The plant is indeterminate, remember? It never stops trying to branch. So if you prune once in June and walk away, by August it has thrown out a dozen new laterals and you're right back to the leafy tangle. You have to keep at it. Every few days you walk the row and you pinch the new side shoots while they are still small. It takes me about 2 minutes per vine. That is the whole labour cost, and it is exactly the labour cost the fertiliser advice was built to let you skip. A few more details that make the difference between doing it and doing it right. When the vine climbs all the way to the top of your trellis and wants to keep going, do not just let it flop over and run. Pinch the growing tip, and on any laterals you decide to keep up top, prune them back to 2 leaves. 2 leaves gives that lateral enough leaf area to feed the fruit at its base without it turning into a whole second vine. You're keeping the factory lean. Prune in the cool of the morning, not the heat of the afternoon. A cut made in the morning when the plant is full of water and the air is still cool seals over clean and dry. A cut made in the hot afternoon on a stressed, wilting plant stays open longer and is an open door for disease. Same cut, different time of day, different result. I tested that one too. And keep your fruit up off the soil. That is half the reason you train the vine vertical in the first place. A cucumber lying on damp ground rots on the bottom, gets chewed, and sits in exactly the disease zone you just worked to open up. Up on the trellis, hanging in the air and the light, it grows straight and clean. Every one of these little moves points the same direction. Energy into fruit, air through the plant, fruit off the ground. None of it costs a dime. All of it disappeared from the literature for the same reason. You cannot put a price tag on a habit. Now, before we keep going, I want to share something with you. If everything I just walked you through is making sense, if you're starting to see how much of your yield is a measurement problem rather than a luck problem, then the full pruning system is laid out step by step in my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. Chapter 4 is called Strategic Pruning, the Yield Multiplier, and it is the longest chapter for a reason. It covers the single-litre cucumber method I just showed you, plus the tomato sucker removal system, the 2-litre training, and squash vine management, with clear diagrams for each one so you can see exactly which shoot to cut and which to keep. This is for the gardener who is already growing food and wants a lot more from the beds they already have. The whole book is $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on the screen. Take your time finding it. No rush. I will be right here. If you're on a phone or a laptop, the link is right down in the description. All right, let us get into why this ever disappeared in the first place. Here is what actually happened. After 1945, the country was left with enormous factories that had spent the war turning out ammonium nitrate for munitions. When the war ended, that capacity did not just shut down, it got pointed at agriculture. Those same plants started producing synthetic fertilizer by the trainload, and all of that product needed a market. So the advice that reached home, gardeners shifted. It stopped being about labor and started being about inputs. Feed more, water more, buy the bag, and you can see why. Fertilizer is a thing you can package, ship, and sell again next spring. Pruning is not. A single litre cut is unpaid labor that sells nothing and shows up on no invoice. The extension advice of that era standardized around what could be standardized, measured rates of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that worked across a mechanized field. Hand pruning a vine to one stem does not scale to 1,000 acres of machine-harvested cucumbers. So it dropped out of the home garden literature, even though it stayed alive the whole time, in the commercial glasshouses where it always worked. Now, let me be honest with you, because I do not think this was a pure conspiracy. Pruning is real work, and the field hybrids that came along were bred to sprawl and to produce without anyone ever touching them. They were built for the machine, not the trellis. So the advice was not a lie exactly. It fit the way commercial growing was headed. The trouble is that the home gardener with a trellis and 20 minutes a week was never told they had a different option. Nobody handed them the cordon method and said, "This is yours. This still works on a small scale." It just quietly fell off the page. And that is the part that costs you. Every season you let a vine sprawl is a season of mostly leaves. More canopy means less airflow, which means more powdery and downy mildew, which means a shorter, sicker plant. And under all that foliage, a fraction of the fruit. I have the numbers in my notebook. 9 cucumbers off the vine I left alone. 34 off the one I trained to a single litre. Same variety, same soil, same drip line. The plant did not change. The advice changed, somewhere around 1945, and home growers have been paying 3 to 4 times over for it ever since, without ever knowing there was a bill. Now, stay with me, because I promised you one more thing. The pantry item I add to my watering can the week the first fruit sets. It is unsulfured blackstrap molasses. That is it, the plain stuff from the baking aisle. I add 1 tablespoon per gallon of water in the can once a week, and I start the week I see that first little cucumber swelling on the vine. Here is the science. A heavy fruiting cucumber is burning through potassium and trace minerals faster than the soil can hand them over, and molasses carries both. Potassium plus a load of micronutrients, but the real work happens below the surface. Those simple sugars feed the soil microbes around the roots, feed the microbes, and they keep cycling nutrients, keeping the whole root zone active right when the plant needs it most. You are not just feeding the plant, you are feeding the thing that feeds the plant. What I found in my own garden was that this is what carries a vine late. Down here in Zone 7A, with my unheated polytunnel buying me a few extra weeks on each end, I am still pulling cucumbers in October, while my neighbour's plants quit back in August. I tested it, I confirmed it across 2 seasons, and it costs about a quarter a week, which is exactly why you never heard about it. There is no molasses display on the fertilizer aisle. The cheapest fixes are usually the oldest ones, and the oldest ones are the first to disappear. All right, before I let you go. Now you have the pruning, and you have the late season feeding trick. And that molasses at fruit set is really just the rough version of something I lay out properly in the book. Chapter 5 is the 3-phase feeding calendar. It breaks feeding into establishment, flowering, and fruiting with the specific amendments for each stage and a timeline diagram so you can see exactly what to give the plant and when. It is the structured system behind the trick I just handed you. It is in Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol, 115 pages, $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. This one is for the gardener who's ready to stop guessing and start measuring. If you're watching on the television, go ahead and grab your phone and point it at the QR code on the screen. Take your time finding it. I am in no hurry. And if you're on a phone or laptop right now, that link is sitting in the description. So that is the whole thing. A single litre cart plus stripping the bottom 5 to 7 nodes is what turns a cucumber from a leaf factory into a fruit factory. 9 cucumbers became 34 in my test bed. Same season, same water. That is the technique the home garden columns stopped printing after the war, and now it is back in your hands, along with the pantry trick to carry your vines into October. Do not take my word for it. Train one vine to a single litre this season and let the rest of the row sprawl the way they always have. Then count what each one gives you. That is how you will know. And if you want another one of these, I dug a tomato trick out of a 1943 USDA pamphlet, tested it in my test bed against modern best practice, and it won. That is a video for another day. All right, that's what I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one.